one too.
You sound
We,
good.
yeah, we all sound good. You know what? The crew's back together. Here, sometimes I'm with them, sometimes they're with me. This time, David Morisuti, Frank Stanishi, Griff Bordegon, we're all together on YWC Football Talk. 5 weeks of the season gone. How have we assessed it so far? Because before I even get into that, it was going well, and then you know what? The dam broke. The dam broke in week 5.
You asked the
Uh,
question a week too late.
Everyone's like, look at how these quarterbacks are doing. They're doing phenomenal.
No one's
Everybody's
None of them
hurt.
have been. None
healthy.
of them have been injured. They've all stayed healthy.
And then in one game, two
In one
guys.
game, two sidelines have an extra two people at the sideline and two people gone. Yeah, U Sports well represented in that game.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. The only thing with all the injuries and stuff, though, the one that I always wondered about, though, was with Zach, that he was ruled out of the game, but then was still in his uniform. I found that to be very interesting, where it's like, yeah, he's done for the night, but he's still dressed. Maybe, like, I don't know if is there a rule like you have to have a certain amount of quarterbacks dressed, or what was going
No,
on
I,
there,
I
but
I just think it's just Zach was trying to keep himself, in around the sidelines. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised he kept himself in full gear. Usually, if you're ruled out with Frank, I don't know. I don't like to use the C word unless I'm absolutely certain, but it looked like it was a concussion for him because they set upper body injury, even if it's a neck injury. I'm so
Uh,
surprised he didn't just take the pads off and get himself in street clothes.
or even if he
whether
stayed like half dressed, like he still kept his like bottoms on.
whether it's a concussion or not, he's going to say it was his neck. That's where we've been before with him,
Yes, we have.
and that looked more like a neck injury because I don't know how you guys saw what caused the injury. What we think caused the injury was the arm around the neck, and it was less for me what would cause a concussion, more cause a problem with somebody's neck.
Yeah, like the whiplash,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, as far as we're concerned, and the rest of the world is concerned, if Zach's out, we've learned this already. I don't know if it's changed in time. It's a concussion. As far as everybody's concerned, it's a concussion. But he's claimed it's his neck, and this time I can honestly say that I think if he says it again, I'll believe him this time a little more than I believed him last time.
I'm in
Yeah.
the same boat with all of that, but the the big one with now with Winnipeg is just kind of seeing, hey, if is your plan a 5 year plan, or is it getting shrunken down to like, we're ready to go to the next phase of Blue Bomber football? Because we all know Mike O'Shea is red. He will ride or like Zach Caleros is his ride or die. We've known that since Zach's gone to Winnipeg. But it's gonna be interesting now to see what happens at quarterback. Where does Drew Brown fit in all this? But the big one is just the injury to Bo Levi Mitchell. Like, not the best PR move by the Ticats with that statement and just the way Scott Milanovich handled everything. Not everyone in the world has Chris Milanovich working for them. But the big thing when you now look at the Hamilton perspective of it is, and I was saying this to Frank earlier today, David, the East is kind of well, let's call it the metaphorical wild, wild west now, except for the Ottawa Redblacks.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're Ottawa now, you're like, okay, this is our chance. Like, I know you know, they're off to an 0-4 start. They're not looking so hot, but Hamilton, no Bill Levi Mitchell is a killer. Like, I'm sorry, but like that offense was fine. I don't think it was like I wouldn't say it was the most dangerous offense in the East, personally. Like, I don't even think they're the like I think well right now they're third best in scoring in the division. Like, that is a team that needed Bo Levi Mitchell.
Yes.
They need Bo Levi Mitchell to be that contending team. So now if you're Ottawa, yeah, you're 0-4, but you got a potential window here for with Hamilton losing Bo Levi Mitchell. Also, if you're a team out west that's looking for the crossover, because we've sure seen that happen before. That third spot, it's up for grabs. It is now. It's gonna be a marathon finish. Like, I don't think you can say for sure what's gonna happen weeks down the road, but yeah, I know I see this as especially in the East. There's a clear 1-2 pecking order. Now more so, especially with like I hate this count out Hamilton, but I'm sorry if you saw how Trey Ford looked and you're relying on Jake Dolagala, like unless they're trading for a quarterback, which I don't know, guys. You see a quarterback out there for sale that's gonna give Hamilton any hope?
See quarterbacks out there. I just don't see them for sale. That's all. Like the
like
Argos could
they-
get
like-
the world for Arbuckle right now.
Like if you're Hamilton, you saw that now that Winnipeg got Drew Brown, aren't you kind of kicking yourself that maybe you didn't look like that didn't the Bo Levi Mitchell injury didn't happen a week earlier, or the Drew Brown trade didn't happen a week later? Like you're kind of like kicking yourselves. Maybe you make a call to Winnipeg, say, hey, we know you like Drew Brown, but how much do you like Drew Brown?
Kyle Walters is a lot of thinking to do when it comes to a move like that, but I think the whole Ryan Dinwiddie Drew Brown relationship, just going that angle, I think it was always damaged. And whenever he said, Drew's our guy, Drew's this, we know this is football people. That's coaching 101. That's PR 101, because you're not going to publicly throw a guy under the bus or say right away, yeah, no, I don't believe in him, because if you do that, you open up a world of chaos to where it's self-believable. And then now, when you trade for him, we know that the value is not there, but then Dinwiddie getting a first-round pick back for him is huge. Meanwhile, now, like, if you're Hamilton, you almost... I feel... I'd also just gonna say this. I think you kind of gotta go roll with what you got, unless they get skunked in their next two contests. Because let's face it, they have at Saskatchewan, and then they have let's do this now at Toronto next weekend. So you have two games against two teams where you have the last two Grey Cup champions you got to play. And now, obviously, both teams are different, even though one is completely different coaching. But if you're Hamilton, you got to stay afloat, or this is going to fall apart very quickly. I think it's just you got to rely on your defense, and their defense really has not been their strong suit. But you brought in Wynton McManus, you have Jamal Peters, you have Stav, you have all these other guys. Let's see what you can do on the defensive side of the ball to really, trying to hold all these teams offensively when scoring's been at an all-time high. Like two of the games this week, and we're going to get into it in a little bit, but the over-unders are 60 and 62.5. So if you're Hamilton, I think you got to learn how to play boring football instead of exciting football until or if Bo comes back at all this season. And let's be frank, I would lean towards him probably being done for the year.
Yeah. I know they want to hold out hope that potentially he can come back, but I'm sorry. You see that ankle? Did you see that ankle?
Look, it's literally Chad Kelly from last year all over again, where it was, week out, week in and week out. Oh, yes, he could come back. Yes, he could come back. I think it's one of those ones. Best case scenario, I think, would be they make it into, because even, you look at the Grey Cup, it's only 4 months away. With an injury like that, I think if you're the Ticats, you gotta punt the season away, and next year just say, hey, only one team's missing the playoffs. We'll revisit everything at that time.
Can I align this conversation a little bit and head back to the injuries, both quarterbacks going, Caleros and, of course, Bo?
100%.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers were already, if they weren't already concerned about after Zach Caleros, then they're not as smart as we all know they are. Zach Caleros today is not the same Zach Caleros of 3-4 years ago, or even before he was injured. I'm referring to now, not today, but before he was injured. Neither is Bo Levi Mitchell. Bo Levi Mitchell isn't the quarterback of 3-4 years ago. They flipped. If this happened 3-4 years ago, Winnipeg wouldn't have won a couple of Grey Cups, and Bo Levi Mitchell would not be something that would be missed that much, considering how they played then. My point is that Winnipeg should be prepared for replacing Caleros, because I think they went into this season half buying the fact that they needed to replace him. He has been nothing like he's been in the past. He's a great man, a great player, a great quarterback, but he's been better. And their Winnipeg is already, I think, they needed to work on who's next. And that's why they made the trade they did, David. I believe that's why they made the trade. They're going back to the plan they had 2 years ago, where their backup quarterback of the future is now back again, in my opinion.
But like, if you're Taylor Giersma, what's the point then? Like, why like I understand you gotta have your options, but like that's why you brought this guy in. That's why you made a big push to sign him, was so that
I
he's the
agree.
next guy.
I agree. But David, don't you think before the injury to Zach, they thought they had more time to work him into the position that you're right about? You are 100% right.
But they made the
That was
trade
what they were
before Zach
planning.
got hurt. So to me, that was also like you're telling Taylor, hey, now you got competition for you first had him in a competition, well, not competition, but to say, can you earn the backup spot? He did that. Now you're saying we're gonna put you under the microscope again. Like to me, that's where I'm confused.
Well, absolutely. And that's why they did it. It's like I said, Zach was not somebody they were counting on this year.
I also think too the Drew Brown signing was more of a punt, not punting the situation down next year, but not having to worry about potentially drafting or signing a quarterback in free agency. Because say if this is Zach's last season, because we all know, look, he's on the wrong side of 30, headed towards 40. He decides to hang it up this year and become, say, the quarterback's coach for the Bombers, or whomever. Maybe he goes back to Cincinnati. Who knows?
I would say he would stay in Ontario because he's an Ontario person.
Yeah, say for example, maybe if Miller wants to bring him on, Milanovic wants to bring him on, and their staff. You now with Winnipeg have a competition, a quarterback next year, to where it's a true competition, not the supposed competition the Red Blacks just ran with Mayer and Brown. Excuse me. Now with Winnipeg, you can do it where you have Elgersma, you have Brown. You just say, hey, the best man win. Both guys are reliable, and you also know too if one were to get hurt. And we're not wishing injury upon anyone. It's just it's a violent game we cover. You have a security blanket to fall on, whether that's Elgersma or whether that's Brown. Because even say if Brown wins a starting job and plays bad, you can easily just pull the chain and do to Elgersma, kind of like what we see all the time where. I know it was injury related, but look at what happened with Chad Kelly. He took over for MBT in the Grey Cup, and he hasn't looked back since. Obviously, there's been a couple scandals and injuries, but apart from that, though, it's all about game of opportunity, and the opportunity is there for both men to seize.
And history is a teacher. And the history that you're talking about with Kelly is very true. But the other history that's true, the last time the Argos won a Grey Cup, somebody was on the sidelines and then came out injured, and they used him, being Zach Collaros, because they had no other option. So if Winnipeg hasn't learned that lesson, then that's why I think Brown's brought in, because they've learned that lesson. They have to have options at quarterback, even though we all talk about it a million times a week, how the CFL is dependent on a starting quarterback. The reality of it, people really got to suck it in. The reality is, without Hamilton's a totally different team without Bo. They're not that team anymore. So they've got to, like you said, I agree with you 100% that now they have to rely on the other two phases more than they did before, because they're going to end up with the ball more often. So that's the situation. You're right about that. And so is David, that, they need to, there needs to be a plan. And the plan now is one that they have to do, that perform, that they had no idea they'd have to perform. There's always the nightmare, that you're going to lose your quarterback. Nobody's stupid enough to think that their quarterback in the Canadian Football League is going to play 18 games.
Exactly. And also, if David, you got to text me, I had to find a way to bookmark that title, which Frank, thank you for that. If you're wondering now why this show is called History as a Teacher, you have to thank Mr. Stanishi for that. I want to go back to the crossover argument, because I always thought there was a possibility of it happening again this year, but now it is extremely real. Because if you look at the West Division, Winnipeg is still going to be around, even though their losses have been pretty bad. Saskatchewan's looking good. Calgary's looking really good. We're going to have to get into that one. BC, I think, is kind of finding the rhythm. I think, not that we wrote them off too early, but I think it's kind of like, you know what, hey, they'll be okay. But you also have an Edmonton Elks team that's legitimately dangerous this year and has only lost the one. They really lost because Cody Fajardo threw 3 interceptions. I don't care how good of a quarterback you are. You throw that many picks in a game, you're not going to win. So the wild, it's like just really, the CFL is just the whole wild west this year, where you have a lot of teams now that can make a case for the playoffs, and maybe you only get 2 teams coming out of the East. Maybe there's a third, who knows, but if your teams like Toronto and Ottawa, these next 6 weeks are really going to make or break your season. And in the case of Ottawa, I'll say this now. You look at their schedule, they play Edmonton in 48 hours in Edmonton, a team who they beat on opening night. But then I want to pull up the rest of their schedule, just because It's not exactly peachy. So they play at Edmonton, versus Winnipeg, versus Montreal, at Sask, versus Winnipeg, at the Alouettes, versus the Lions, and then Ryan Din when he comes back to Toronto. So you look at a path like that for an Ottawa team. If they lose, I think 2 more games, that's pretty much if they lose their next 2 games by July 19th, I think we can safely write their obituary if they're 0-6. I think that's a very safe thing to do.
Yeah, you give an 0-4 team. You think in some cases it's tough. They gotta be in that 0-6, 0-7 range. We've seen it with Hamilton. How many times Hamilton started the season 0-3 and 0-4, and then they make a run to the end, Frank? We talked about this so many times on our show. So to
100%.
me, yeah, no team right now should feel a certain way about their season. Like BC, yeah, do they expect to be 1-3? No, but you win a game and you win a couple of games, you're right back into it because Calgary, you got a bunch of 2-2, couple 2-2 teams in the West there. Yeah, Edmonton, Saskatchewan are 3-1, but Edmonton's a team that they're gonna be it's gonna be tough for them the next. They got an easier matchup against Ottawa on Thursday, but then they get BC. If BC beats them again, that's that to me is a big. And then they get Saskatchewan after that. Like Edmonton's a team to me that's got to prove that this 3-0 start wasn't just a mirage. So
and I think the reason you can look at it as a mirage is that when everything goes right for a team, winning is easy. It's when things start to go wrong, what the team does when things start going wrong. And that's when the problems happen. And football, as we know from coaches, and we hear it all the time, is a process. A season is a process as well, right? It's not a situation where you start a certain way and you end up a certain way. It's all about curbing the bad runs and enhancing the big runs. And that's what all these teams have to do. And I think the good news for every team is that nobody's 4-0.
No, nobody. That's
right.
The fact that no one is undefeated at the moment makes it so that right now any team can host the West Final and East Finals on November 7th. Any team on Halloween night can be playing in the East or West semifinal. Really, this season is a jigsaw puzzle that we're literally having to figure out a piece at a time. It's a week at a time season. Like, I really think that, how they always say the season doesn't start till Labor Day? I think by Labor Day, we're really going to know who has a chance to get to Calgary, and the teams that aren't are probably basically where it's like you're on life support and have to essentially play flawless football for 2 months to even have a chance to sniff at Calgary. So you look, because starting next year when the season being pushed out, Labor Day is going to be, I think this is the last true Labor Day that's going to be make or break, because I think at the point by the next year, Labor Day is going to become that point of the season where your season's going to come to die. Where it's kind of like if you're at a bad point by Labor Day, chances are you're not recouping. Now with Labor Day this year being the last, if you could stay afloat and be treading water come that quadruple header weekend, September 12th, who knows what's going to happen, because at that point, every team but Hamilton plays at that point, and at that point you're going to have 8 teams playing 4 games in one day. A lot can be decided by that point, but for now, like even I was saying too, so David, I don't know if I've told you this before, but I've had a philosophy with the Argonauts for the whole season. Can I tell it to you?
Sure.
So they're 2-2 right now, better than last year. I've always said they have to be 3-4 or 4-3 by the time they get back. That's like the good sweet spot I think a lot of people expect them to be, but that's where I feel like it was always good to have. But now I feel like if they go 3-4 heading back into that game against Calgary, that one stretch they have basically from when they come back home on August 6th to when they go to Hamilton on Labor Day, September 7th, I think that's really what's going to make or break their season. Because in that 5-game stretch, if they go anything, I think, worse than 3-2 at that point, that's really what can make or break their season. I feel like we're starting to learn more about this team, but I feel like as the weeks go on and injuries start to pile up, and there's a pretty significant one going into this game on Friday night, they have a chance to basically write their own story. And I feel like right now they're doing a good job of it. It's just I'm not ready to say they're a Grey Cup contender, but I definitely think they're going to be in the mix for the playoffs.
Oh, I think Toronto's by virtue of what's going on with Hamilton, I think their playoff odds improved drastically. But we know offensively, this team is good enough to be a playoff team. I didn't never think that their offense was going to be a problem. I know there's a lot of question. Would Chad Kelly get back to the quarterback he was? To me,
The
it was the
offensive
defense.
line's been really good this year so far.
I thought the last game they weren't as sharp. It wasn't their best game, and they always struggle against Calgary. I don't know. Calgary is the boogeyman to this team. Always.
You have a three-headed monster on the defensive line. What do you expect?
Well, but that's the thing. Your offensive line has to know that that's their challenge. They got to be ready for that. They got to be ready.
Killers on that defensive line in Calgary.
Now they didn't have Shepley. That's a big loss for them in that.
Yeah, Brendan Kemp had a bad game.
Right. So to you that if I'm the Argos, what's concerning is just the offensive line struggled again in a matchup that they're going to get tested again. Look at what they got coming up against Winnipeg. Why did Levi Mitchell get hurt? Well, Jake Ceresna was allowed to just come at him full steam ahead, right? Jake Ceresna got pushed into Levi Mitchell by his offensive lineman. So, as much as the Argos are going to say, they don't have their starting quarterback. Yeah, but they also got to deal with that defensive line in Winnipeg that's always been tough. And that's why Winnipeg has been the team that they've been for so long. So I think the Argos are they're not in a bad spot. One game, I'm not ready to just, completely throw out the panic sign, but that wasn't a good showing. You can't have a performance like that against a team that, to me, Calgary is a good team, but I didn't think they were that good. I'm sorry, Vernon Adams, he's a good quarterback. He's not a quarterback that throws 6 touchdowns in a game.
Until he does.
Because you couldn't stop him, at any point.
Hey, you know what? When it comes to the Argos' chances, I want to make this one little point, and that is the East Division is one Alexander. This is the little one here. One Alexander injury from being totally blown up. The East Division, if Alexander gets hurt the next week or two, the whole East Division is going to be totally unpredictable. Unpredictable.
I hate to say this, but Chad Kelly isn't exactly free and clear of any potential.
That was silent. That was a silent.
Okay.
We know that he's capable of being injured.
Every team right now in the East has to be on pins and needles.
Oh, absolutely.
With their quarterbacks. But
would it be safe to say, though, the Argonauts have the best backup option in the East Division right now?
I was just about to say, out of all teams, Toronto probably feels
they have the best insurance policy as backup.
They feel as good about Nick Arbuckle that Hamilton does about Trey Ford right now. And Montreal's backup is
Dustin Crum.
Dustin Crum?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe with a better team in Montreal that he'll show that he's not as bad as he was in Ottawa, but it's every team that has that. It's just the East has had Levi Mitchell hasn't had an injury like this really since when, Frank? Since he had the shoulder injury in Calgary?
Shoulder.
Right? That took him out for what? Well, he's had 2.
His last two years were
the 1 year where Arbuckle took over,
and he didn't do what injured people do, and that is stop working.
Well, the 1 year that Arbuckle took over, and then the 1 year that Jake Mayer took over.
Yeah, 2 years in a row that he basically became expendable.
Yeah, and then but this wasn't like an injury that we saw this coming. Well, I don't think anyone saw his ankle snap.
No.
I was just I don't like those injuries.
Yeah, like as soon as I saw my group chat popping off about it, I had to tune in right away. So as soon as you see like a foot plant or anything like that, and then a guy goes down, and he's just grabbing at it. You're like, yeah, that's bad. And especially with the fact right away he was the fact he wasn't even taken into the back in a cart, the fact that an ambulance comes on, and all that other stuff right away for.
Well, and they stabilized it. Like that was.
Look,
That
when the players, all the players, even guys who took their time like Zach Caleros, when they all end up on the field, it's serious.
Yeah, that's
That's the dead giveaway. That when all the players are on the field, it's serious.
100%, 100%. It's just it's unfortunate, and it's just you don't want to see it, but at the end of the day, you just have to look at it as where next man up for football, and we'll see what happens with the Ticats, but we'll also see what happens because ticker time, boys, as we've got a plethora of games to go over this week, and we're starting off with, can you believe it or not, the Edmonton Elks being a 6.5-point favorite against the Ottawa Redblacks in Edmonton on Thursday Night Football. I'm sorry, what's to say that Edmonton doesn't cover this number? I know they lost to BC last week and looked pretty bad, but look at what Saskatchewan just did. I know Saskatchewan played close against Ottawa, but that was a get-right game for Trevor Harris, and I expect the same from Cody Fajardo this week. I'm not picking Ottawa until they win something. I'd rather be wrong picking against them than wrong picking for them.
Is there anything that Edmonton didn't do in their last game that caused them to lose that Ottawa can count on? My answer is no.
No.
Is there anything that Ottawa did that they can change when you think about how badly their coach thinks they played?
Your punter learning to tackle?
That kind of frustration by a head coach is a dead giveaway that he has big problems because nothing's working right. And one thing we should be able to say and think about Ryan Dinwiddie, the last thing he ever does is go after his team. He's done hints of it in times we were in post games and we've listened to him talk. He's kind of hinted at it, but I've never seen him this outright frustrated and disappointed in his team. He's talked about offensive lines that got to do better. We got to be able to run the ball, all those things that many coaches say. But what's going on in Ottawa right now looks like a major implosion. Now, I don't know if it's an implosion that can bring forth some success and a wake-up call, because that's all Ottawa's got going for them right now is hopefully a wake-up call.
The one thing, before we get to David, I just want to say, too, how much of this comes down on Sean Burke? Like, how does Sean Burke... I know Sean Burke kind of quietly self-promoted himself instead of getting fired, but if you're OSEG, how can you look at everything with Sean Burke's master plan of, hey, I'm going to take the step away from day-to-day football ops, be president of football operations. I'm going to bring in Ryan Dinwiddie, who's a mastermind, who was a good quarterback in the league.
Grey Cup winner.
Grey Cup winner, two-time Grey Cup head coach of the year. Floor was the East Final except for 2025. If you're Sean Burke, how do you look at ownership and say, hey, like, it's pretty much just the birth child of Ostek and Sean Burke, where if you're Sean Burke, you really got to be watching over your back to say, hey, when does that, Joe Pesci scene from Goodfellas come in, where you bring him into the room and just you put one in the back of the head in his tenure in Ottawa, because we all know they're not going to want to done Ryan Dinwiddie, even if the season goes as badly as it's currently going. That's just, I think, one talking point that's got to start to get a little bit louder on how does Sean Burke survive past 2026.
Well, they got to start turning things around. Like, as much, I get it, Ryan Dinwiddie is the GM, but Sean Burke is also pulling a lot of the shots. And so it's kind of, I think, in mano a mano. So it comes down to who does the ownership put the responsibility on. I think Sean Burke has been there for a majority of it, and so he'll take the brunt, but I don't know. Like they went with this new approach. They went and they made these changes thinking that, okay, like we're gonna be better. Like this is supposed to be better. It hasn't. Like I don't begrudge anyone who's wondering, how is this better? How is this better than what was happening with Bob Dice and such? So, yeah.
He's been there since 2022, and it's just there's been nothing really to show for it that's meaningful. Like because we all were in the room in 2024 when Bob Dyson, Drew Brown spoke, and it looked like, hey, we want to make progress, we want to go forward. They've done no progress since they lost to Toronto in that East semifinal game. They've done nothing. They had no running game. The running game's still a question mark. They were one of the worst teams in the league last year, and they're currently the worst team in the league this year. So if you're the Ottawa Red Blacks, I don't know how you look at it and think anything positively of it. It's just until they get winning, which this team kind of screams. There's two things about this with Dinwiddie. This team's pretty much a carbon copy of what the Toronto Argonauts were last year. Bad offensive line, bad defense, mediocre quarterback play. And for Ryan Dinwiddie, maybe the grass wasn't exactly greener on the other side of the fence. Maybe moving to the 6-1-3 wasn't exactly the same as if he had stayed with the Argonauts. Because if he stays with the Argonauts and they're playing as well as they have, even with the defensive miscues, and we'll get into that in the next game, who's to say this Argonauts team's not 3-1 right now instead of 2-2?
I'll weigh in real short on Burke.
Okay.
Burke came to Ottawa with a great plan. He brought his quarterback from Hamilton, got injured, and they didn't have a quarterback the first year. They didn't have a quarterback the second year. They've never had a quarterback. So now the question is, the honest question, the real question is, whose fault is it that there's not a quarterback in the Canadian Football League team? Is it the head coach, or is it the GM? That's where I stand on it. So if there isn't a quarterback to play quarterback good enough in Ottawa at any time under Burke's reign, whose fault is that? It's all the chickens are coming home to roost. He's gambled on quarterbacks that aren't healthy, and no matter what you do outside of the quarterback, guys, if you can't have success at quarterback, you're not going to win. And that Eastern final that Toronto beat Ottawa at, the only reason why Ottawa was there is because of the quarterback.
Yeah, to me, Ottawa wasn't just a quarterback away from competing. Like they needed to prove that they had the studs on defense to do it as well. They don't rely on the running game as much as they should, which, I seem to be a bit of a shocking issue in Toronto as well. Like, to me, it's just Ottawa's. They got to it takes. I know sometimes CFL rosters can be turned around pretty quickly. I think this is more than a 1-year turnaround for Ottawa. It's going to take some time.
How much do they have to undo?
Yeah.
They have quite a bit to undo, but the other thing with Ottawa too simply is just because I want to touch on the running point for a second, because I remember this. Toronto had traded Dan Adeboboye in February 25, and I had texted David immediately saying, it sucks for Toronto, but I like this for him because he's going to get his opportunities.
And what happened?
He's not gotten a single opportunity since he's gotten there. You hear more about his wonderful parents going to Ottawa every week to watch their son play football, and their son's not getting the chances to. And I thought maybe with Ryan Dinwiddie coming on board, he knows what Dan can do. So we'll see what happens there. But I think we're all in alignment here with Edmonton. But Friday Night Football, Argonauts. I believe this is technically a Toronto home game, even though it's in Winnipeg. But the Argonauts are a 2.5-point favorite as they travel to Winnipeg to take on the Bombers. I really think this game is just going to come down to how do they look against, how does the defense look for Toronto? Because I have confidence in on the offense. We all know what the offense is going to be, but the defense has looked pretty bad. Benji Franklin probably had one of his worst games as an Argonaut last week, and on top of all that, Cameron Judge is, I would think, projected towards not playing as he missed practice again today with a head injury. I assume it's a concussion. So
we'll find out tomorrow a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we'll find out a bit more tomorrow. I believe myself and Mr. Morasudi will be at the University of Guelph. But with all that said, though, I think Toronto can win this game just because they found ways to sneak it out past Winnipeg before. But I think this is going to be a close football game. I really think this is going to be close. I think it's just really going to come down to, can Chad, prevent the interceptions? I think as long as Kelly plays a clean game, I think the Argonauts can win this game.
Yeah, that's been Toronto's problem is when the defense is struggling, the offense can't give the other team free opportunities, which they did against Calgary. But also, I think they preach too much aggressiveness. I mean, they're trying too hard to
Get an
you know
interception.
go for interceptions that maybe you just, especially like in the first half, you just got yourself with, I think, within a score. Don't be trying to, when you're out on an island by yourself, don't be trying to go for an interception. Because if you go for an interception, you better get the darn interception, which Benji Franklin didn't do.
Nope.
And it got taken down for a 70-yard touchdown. Like, to me, those are the plays right there. Better communication. They really lacked the communication there. And look, Priester's injury, it's a daunting. That's a daunting injury because your secondary was already lacked a little bit of experience. Now with Caesar there, I think Caesar can maybe turn things around. But you got to have a conversation with Benji Franklin because that was not good enough.
But he's had success. He's gone to the well, and he's been, the Grey Cup and other important games where he's made that big play. And one thing's for sure, though, you're right, David. The first thing you said is true. Yes, they have to be aggressive, but there has to be a limit to how aggressive they need to be.
And it seems like from whatever we've talked to Mike Miller post game, it's just he likes the aggressiveness, but at the same time, too, I think he's got to be told, you know what, let your guys know, hey, you don't have to go for that hero play because if it works, great. If it doesn't work, you look like an idiot. It's a straight up matter of the truth. The one thing with this Argonauts team as well, there's one defensive player I really want to give my flowers to because I feel like he makes a good play almost every game, and that's Andrew Chatfield on the defensive line. I know we all look at Ralph Hawley, but Andrew Chatfield's really had a good start to the season so far.
He had a good year last year, but then I think frustration was getting to him. He was, getting penalized quite a bit. I always thought he was a pretty solid, solid defensive lineman for them.
I feel like
he had 7 sacks
Parrish,
last year.
I feel like with Derek Parrish being gone, though, his role's more elevated now.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I think he has the potential to do more. I think they need to get more out of that defensive line because that's the other issue. When your secondary is struggling, you got to get pressure on the quarterback. And I'm sorry, but Ferdinand Jr. was allowed, he could have gone window shopping while also trying to throw the football. Like, they got to be better. But I think Chatfield has taken steps. I think Ralph Hawley, that addition, I think he'll get himself going pretty soon. But there's got to be better symmetry between the defensive line and the secondary because they got exposed. They definitely did.
Darius Pickett's another name on the defense that's been pretty well this year so far. Yeah. But with this game though, like, do you guys think Toronto's going to win, or do you think Winnipeg kind of turns it around here?
Oh boy, there's so many factors here. What we've seen from the Argo quarterback, all right, is we've seen him throw a lot of interceptions.
Yeah.
But one thing we've seen is he has enough of an ego that he doesn't give up that easily. But he might have too much of an ego to realize that there's what he can do and what he can't do. And he's going to have to trim his game a little bit. And like you said, it's totally true. They got to have ball security. There needs to be more ball security involved in the offense. And in the defense, we talked about going too far defensively. So for them to win, I hate to say it, but the team's going to have to learn to be a little more conservative. We have to pull the reins in a little bit.
I completely agree. I think from a perspective, I do think that what's it called? I just think both teams need to. Both teams are really on a coin flip right now with this game. I think both teams just really need to. This is a real figure it out for both teams because I think if you win this game, you build that confidence going forward. But if you lose, you're gonna have a lot of questions to answer. And I honestly think Toronto. Both teams need this game, honestly. I was about to say one team needs this more than the other. No, I think both teams need to win this game. And whoever loses this game, you have to go back to the drawing board. And if you're Winnipeg, I don't think you want to do that.
Toronto they might not be able to get I think offensively they're fine. if their defense doesn't step up and turn things around, especially against Winnipeg, against, I don't know who's going to start right now. It looks like it's probably going to be El Giersma, but yeah, no, they gotta do a lot better defensively, and this is a good opportunity to do it.
Exactly that. I just wondered from Mike Miller as well. With preparing for Algersma, did you watch any film from Laurier or from like the Green Bay Packers to see if you can find anything about his game? Obviously, I know those are different levels of football, but think of his CFL sample size. It's not that big at all. And even is this a chance for Mike O'Shea to really use Drew Brown and those like dual packages maybe? Like I think we're gonna see a little bit Mike O'Shea get into his bag. But Mike Miller times 2 are going to have to get in their bag as a special teams coordinator from Winnipeg and the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts, because Toronto special teams is coming to questions, and Trey Vavel made that very clear in last year's game in Winnipeg, if you two remember. So you can't let him get. I think Vavel and Grant are 2 huge X factors in this game for both teams.
Yeah, no, for me, Chad has to clean it up. Winnipeg's going to want to make him throw under pressure, make those bad mistakes. I think Chad's got to be more willing to, instead of throwing a ball that doesn't need to be thrown, use your legs or eat it. Just show Winnipeg you're not willing. You got to take some. You got to go for the deep shots, absolutely, but don't make the unnecessary ones.
2 weeks ago in the game against Sask, he did 2 in a row, one to Tyler Conman and one to Mackay Polk, and I criticized both of them because my logic was if it doesn't work once, what makes you think it's going to work twice? And some people really got on my case about that, to where I want to be like, thank you for reading my column, but that's what I think. Saturday night, I think is going to be the game of the week with Montreal and Calgary. Montreal being a 3.5-point favorite. I want to pick Calgary because of last week, but I feel like a lot of people are going to falsely pick Calgary thinking, hey, Lightning's going to strike twice, even though Montreal still right now is probably the best team in the East. I do like Montreal to win this game, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Stampeders cover the spread.
I could have fun with this pick. I could say Alexander doesn't finish the game.
Yeah.
And I give the game to Calgary.
I mean, look, Calgary wants Alexander to be running. They want him out of the pocket and running. And I think that, but the Philpott show will be interesting.
Yeah.
Like the Twins going again head to head. Because I don't think Jalen he got hurt last year, right? Which one got hurt last year?
Tyson.
Okay. So I don't think they played against each other. So,
and now it's back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity for both of them. Like, this should be a featured matchup. Which brother is going to come up big for their team? Now, we know that Tyson right now is getting the bulk of the – like, he's getting everything. He's getting all the looks. I do think that he had a pretty decent day, 2 touchdowns. Nothing to – he had, I think, 8 targets in that game. It's just that Tyson right now is a clear-cut number 1 Canadian receiver in the league, in my opinion. Like, he's getting, he's averaging about 8. Actually, no, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one. He's averaging close to 11 attempts a game. 11 to 12 attempts a game. He almost had 200 yards last against Ottawa. He had 193 against Toronto with the 2 touchdowns. Now, with Toronto secondary, that's not saying much. But to me, if I'm Calgary, Tyson Philpott's got to be you got to find somebody else. You got to tell Montreal somebody else is going to have to beat us because it isn't going to be Tyson Philpott.
You got Cole Speaker, you got Tyler Snead, you even got a running game. So it's very interesting to see who wins this one. But I don't know who's going to. Here's the thing I was going to say with Calgary. I don't know if you saw this, but they've decided to run promotions for their home games where however many points they put up on their team, you get that percentage off the tickets for the next game. So whoever's working in the Calgary marketing department probably took a little bit of a licking at head office this past week when tickets are now 58% off for their game next week against these same Montreal Alouettes. Sunday night, I don't think we need to say much unless this game's 8.5 points. I think Sask runs away with it just because the Saskatchewan Roughriders need a game where they truly kill someone, and I think this is the perfect spot to do so.
And they're a team that has to prove to be a little more consistent. You know, they really rested on their laurels a little bit.
A little bit, yes, but also too though for Sask, you can't like I feel like they play down to the level of their competition more than they play up to the level of their competition. And even though Hamilton, it's adversity city right now, what's to say this isn't a game where Hamilton because if Hamilton goes in and shocks the world on Sunday night, this season's truly the wild, wild west, guys.
Yeah.
You know, there's another adage that's said in the Canadian Football League. You got to be able to run the ball.
Yeah.
Right? And that's part of the problem Saskatchewan has.
Which is weird considering that they have the talent. And one thing I always keep forgetting about with them, but Andrew Harris is the running back coach there.
Huh? He is.
Like, I'll always watch a game and then I see him on the sidelines and I'm like, I just keep forgetting it. And then I'll see him. I'm like, Andrew Harris? And I'm like, oh, right. I think he's been the coach ever since he retired from the Argonauts when Corey Mace took over.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
that was his first job. That's his first real job.
Yeah. His first post-football job. Yeah. But if you're Hamilton, you kind of have to have a why not us mentality because if you look at them too, like I said, they have to play at Saskatchewan and then they play, say it with me now, at Toronto. So for those two right there, it's just there. But I'm sorry. If you're Saskatchewan, this is a game you have to have and you have to win convincingly because if you don't, there's going to be a lot of questions to be answered by a lot of fans who like to drink their old style Pilsner on game days. So I think you want to avoid that if you're the Rough Riders.
No kidding. And right now, there's a lot of unhappiness there in regards to people showing up at the stadium. So, you know, that's one thing that worries me about the Canadian Football League right now.
The one thing on that point, though, is apparently, like, attendance was pretty bad in Calgary on Thursday night, but apparently their season ticket holder drive is up. So that's why I think they got the Grey Cup, apart from the real reason, which I think is just pretty much this is a farewell Grey Cup for McMahon Stadium, because the next time they'll go to McMahon is probably when they have that new stadium built, where and whenever that is. But I've been starting to think about this with Grey Cups just before we go. So you have Calgary this year, you have Regina next year. 2028 hasn't been announced, and I really think there's only two logistically possible spots to host it, and one being Toronto, one being Edmonton. And for Toronto, I know the temporary seats are coming down from the World Cup, but you have a stadium with a bunch of brand new luxury suites, and we see how quickly those temporary stands can go up for a football game. So I really think if Toronto wants it, Keith Pelly has to make one phone call, and the Argonauts and BMO Field will host the 2028 Grey Cup.
Very possible.
Just because because if you go out west again, if you do then 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5 straight Grey Cups out west, I don't know how that's going to fly with all the fans, constantly having to fly out west every year, stay in hotels. Now you give the East people some love because then you also can get the people from, Eastern Ontario, Atlantic Canada, and even Quebec, some of them who could potentially drive into Toronto for the festivities as opposed to having to fly out west all the time. And then I think 29 goes back to, and then 29 you can do in Edmonton, and then maybe 2030, I don't know, maybe Ottawa or Montreal ready to host at that time. For everyone wondering about Montreal, it's not Montreal obviously doesn't have the stadium ready, and Ottawa, TD Place is going to be undergoing a massive renovation, I believe, starting it's either before next season starts or after next season starts, so where the capacity only goes down to 15,000. So I really do think Toronto has a good shot at hosting at 28.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now, with the World Cup behind them, they don't have to worry about any of that. It's just, hey, let's bring the CFL World back to Toronto for the first time since 2016.
You know what? Does the fact that Rogers owns MLSC now and the Argos solely, does that enter into your formula of what you're talking about?
It was always more, I always believe with Toronto, if they want, I always think Keith Pelly's kind of that person where if he wants something, he's going to get it. So that's why I think, when I alluded to the point earlier of if he wants to host the Grey Cup, he just has to go to the board of directors with Rogers and say, hey, I want to do this. This is how much it can cost us, but we're also going to make so much money off of it with, potentially getting a kickback with tourism from the city, potentially with, all the hotels, the flights, and all the fan stuff going on, and all the tickets for the game. I really think it's just more or less for Toronto. They don't have to work as hard as some of the other cities do to pitch to, come to Regina, come to Edmonton, come to Calgary. No offense to those cities. You say the words Toronto wants a Grey Cup, and I think the league will deliver it, no problem. I don't think there's any. I think there'll be some questions, but I think it's more of just we want this. Okay, great, you're getting it.
Yeah, the team has to put forth a desire for it. Absolutely.
I think it's more for Toronto. I think it's more of we want it. Like every city wants to host a Grey Cup, but I think for Toronto, it's more just as long as MLSE wants it, they're going to get it.
Absolutely.
So that's actually the question I'm asking is, do they want it now today more than they did when it was Bell and Tannenbaum?
Yes and no. I just think once the FIFA World Cup, which obviously after today it's completely done in Canada, with the game on right now with Switzerland and Colombia. Once it's done there, I think so much of their focus was getting that stadium ready for the World Cup and the games they hosted, to where now you have the ability to start hosting these events again. Maybe they try for another Heritage Classic. Maybe I don't think a Winter Classic would ever happen, because I think that's something that just will stay in the States. Same with the Stadium Series. But who's to say they don't try for another outdoor game? Who's to say they don't try for a Grey Cup? I think Rogers looks at these opportunities more of, hey, this helps us make money as compared to just bringing it here for the love of bringing it here. I think it is a double-edged sword where, yes, maybe it does change a slight bit, but especially, too, if the Argonauts can be if the Argonauts, even say if this year they have a good season, they make the playoffs, it's just that much more intriguing to if this was the same team as last year, to where they're bad and still trying to get a Grey Cup. I don't think it goes over as well as a team that's competitive, to where it's, hey, there's a chance they're in the game.
I guess the reason I ask is because with what Rogers has done in the past few days, which is basically jettison a bunch of radio stations that weren't making a lot of money, Rogers is pretty cutthroat, I guess is the reputation they have. And I'm just wondering how they'll look at the Argos now once they have total control. And will they tip their hand one way or the other? I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, to be honest. I
do as well, but I also one of those hit kind of home to me with 570 News getting axed. But for as cutthroat as they are, I think they see it whenever Rogers sees an opportunity to make money, they're not going to pass it up. That's why I say that. I think they kind of realize, look, and also now the fact too that the Grey Cup is moved up to where it's the first weekend in November, to where it might be cold, but it's not going to be as freezing as it was compared to having it towards the end of November. I think is that much more incentive to host it.
Absolutely.
I think there's a bunch of factors, but I think that's the main one for Rogers will be money. And I think if Keith Pelly can present them with a compelling case of, hey, we bring this here, this is how much money it can make the city, and this is how much money it can make for us. You make someone, whether it's Edward Rogers, Tony Staffieri, or Keith Pelly makes a phone call to Stewart. Stewart says, okay, cool, let's make it happen.
Absolutely.
That's honestly what I think it comes down to. If they want it, they're going to get it. I think some cities just have to work harder because, like I say, some of the cities got to sell themselves in ownership. But especially, too, if Toronto can, coming out of this, build a solid, the ticket sales keep going up and up for the Argos, that will help it more too. I think if they have all these new suites and these suites are sitting empty for games, it doesn't help in their favor. But then you know what? They can take those suites for a Grey Cup, sell them to the corporate partners and sponsorships, etc., to even maybe help further relationships for the league, for MLSE, for Rogers, etc. So there's a lot of opportunity in there. It's just really up to them if they want it or not.
And hopefully they'll do the team pack thing that they do. Right? If you want Leaf tickets, you have to buy Raptor tickets. If you want Raptor tickets, you have to buy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hopefully, but I think for MLSE, the two teams at Scotiabank Arena are their prized possessions, and then the other three are kind of just like financial assets they hold on to, because we all know the Argos are more just a tax write-off for MLSE, but hopefully they kind of see it as ways now to make money instead of just, you know what, hey, this is something we have, but we all know the two teams who call Scotiabank Arena home are the Golden Gooses for MLSE.
Well, you saw proof of that with the press conference, and you yourself saw how many people were actually watching the press conference.
It got to over 70,000 at one point. That's more than any CFL stadium can hold.
That's the leverage that maybe the Argos will be lucky enough that Rogers decides to leverage and to help the team in that way. because they can do it with sponsors as well, right? It isn't just it isn't just the people that sit in the stands. It's also advertisers that want to advertise for the Raptors, that want to advertise for the Leafs. There could be a 2-for-1 deal in there. And the Jays do that,
Leverage your other teams. Like, yeah, it's an option always.
right? So that's what I hope. I hope that's what this does, and you have one owner and there's no tug of war now. Now, I think we've seen evidence of it. I'm hoping to see it with the Argos in the Canadian Football League, but we've seen it with the Leafs. I mean, nothing says change more than change, and the Leafs made some decisions. There was conversation, and they haven't sat on their hands. They made it look like there's going to be change, and I'm wondering and hoping that for us CFL fans, that some of that kind of thinking where you try stuff happens in this league as well. So that's the hope.
If a rival and someone who like David and I hated as kids is now on the team, anything is possible in this world. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as the three of us did talking to each other. We are now on to week 6 of the CFL season. I feel like this is officially gentlemen, it's a good time to call it we've hit the 25%, the quarter of the first quarter of the season is done. I feel like that's the safe bet to make right now, where who knows what the heck's going to happen. But for Frank Stanishi, for David Morisuti, I'm Griff, 439 of these bad boys in the bag. We'll see you next time for episode 440 of YWC Football Talk. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.